Something I forgot to mention in the previous video is that in general I assume that the input is sorted based on the y coordinate. And for this I take the y coordinate of the top of a vertical line segment and the y coordinate of a horizontal line segment. And when I do the distribution, I could do the distribution while preserving this sortedness based on the y coordinate. I'm not going to go into that detail. It's actually not too difficult to maintain in the I model as well. Alright. Okay, so I have a bunch of line segments sorted based on the y coordinate of the top of the vertical ones and the y coordinates of the horizontal ones. And now I want to do a sweep line approach. And if you recall, the basic details of the sweep line is that I will read this input block by block. Every time I read a block of B elements, I will get B line segments, either vertical and horizontal, and all the line segments will have their event point inside, essentially inside this region. Essentially, I first take the B highest event points and I look at the next B event points and so on. Okay. But I will need a bit more structure to maintain this. To solve this problem, I will need to define the concept of an active list. So what is active list? So active list is a list that corresponds to one slab. So if I have let's say these slabs, every slab will have one active list for itself. Okay. So for every slab I have one active list. The assumption here is that the active list contains all the vertical line segments that I have seen so far, unless I have actively deleted this from the active list. Unless I've explicitly deleted a vertical line segment from an active list, it will be inside that active list as long as I have seen it during my sweep line. What this basically means that if I look at the sweep line, so let's start the sweeping from the top. When I grab this block from the disk, this block, let's say it includes these vertical line segments. Yeah. I will insert this vertical line segment inside this active list. I will insert this one inside this active list, and so on. Then I read the next block, for example, that includes this vertical line segment from this slab, or from the first slab. Again, I insert this vertical line segment inside this active list. The assumption here is that I will keep at most B elements from each active list inside in the internal memory. If the active list of a slab grows, for example, because there are too many line segments in this part of the slab, then I will just write the excess active list elements into the disk. But I will remember where I write them. So as long as I read these active list elements will go somewhere onto the disk in some blocks. But I assume that, but I have a space for one block from each active list in the internal memory. Okay. So that takes care of the vertical line segments. I do not have an event point for the end point of the vertical line segments. I only have an event point for the top vertex. So in other words, if I see a top vertex, insert in the active list. So what do we do when we see a horizontal line segment? When we see a horizontal line segment, something interesting happens. So let's say the sweep line has reached this position. And now I need to handle this horizontal line segment. I need to handle this horizontal line segment. This horizontal line segment spans 3 slabs, and each slab will be handled similarly. So therefore, let's just focus on this first slab that this one spans. To handle this vertical and horizontal line segment, I look at the active list of this slab. Let's, for the sake of argument, assume that this is the first horizontal line segment that I encounter. So now we'll assume that these horizontal line segments are not part of the input. Okay. Then I could have potentially a whole bunch of vertical line segments in my active list. Remember that I have B of them in the internal memory because I have a space of B elements for each slab. I check every vertical line segment that I have from this slab in the internal memory. I have two cases. Either they intersect this horizontal line segment, in which case I report an output, or they don't. If they don't, then I could just delete them because I know that from then on I will no longer see a horizontal line segment that intersected because the bottom vertex has passed. After taking care of everything that was in the internal memory, I go to the disk and I read the rest of the active list of this slab from the disk. I just load them block by block, and every time I load the block, I do this check. Either whether they intersect, in which case I report, or whether they have expired, in which case I delete them from the active list. Okay. So what is the analysis? The main part of the analysis is how we go through this active list, because the part of the active list that is in the memory is essentially for free. But I will need to pay for a number of IOs when I read the active list from the disk. The main observation that we can make here is that every time I read a block from the disk, two things happen for every element of that block. Either I report an IO, or either I report an output, or I delete that element from the disk. But notice that I delete every element at most once, because once a vertical line segment is deleted, it's never going to be inserted again. So therefore, every IO can be paid for by either an output size or an input element. So therefore, I could charge the IO to an input element or to an output element. So therefore, the sweep inside this slab will be charged to the blocks of that slab, either to the IO, to the output or the input, and same for every slab that the horizontal lines spans. So therefore, I will essentially achieve this IO bound.